Exactly.
or trimming.
Yep.
All right, we can go ahead and get started. Everybody's in.
All right.
Mark?
All right, good morning, everyone. It's still morning. Thank you for joining us today with the Anne Arundel Chamber of Commerce. I'm Mark Kleinschmidt, the president here, and Amy Berry is with us, our membership coordinator. We are going to have our next session of what we call our moving forward webinars, and the idea behind them is to try and find information, present information that's very topical and of value to our members that they can use right now in their business. It's certainly been a wild and crazy, challenging 14 months. And we're starting to emerge a little bit. I think maybe a lot of you have heard, it looks like the governor in Maryland is going to lift a lot of the restrictions on Saturday. So we are very close to moving towards more normal activity. So that's exciting. Today's topic is cybersecurity. And it comes at a very timely moment, as we have been reading about, and some of us may have experienced some shortages in gasoline. And as you may know, there was I don't even know the correct words, but we'll hear about a hacking, a violation of the security of the company or companies that run a very strategic pipeline that delivers gas to this East Coast region. And it was hacked and caused a number of issues to occur. So it is real in terms of the potential threat. So cybersecurity becomes a very important thing to deal with. So today we're going to learn a little bit about what you can do about protecting your business, your data, your systems from a potential attack. And then we're going to hear a little bit about what you might be able to do to protect it a little bit further with potentially some insurance coverages. So that's going to be the focus of today. So with that, what I'd like to do is introduce Mylan Stanton from Data Link, a company that does a lot of activity in the computer world, but also specializes in a lot of cybersecurity thing. And he's going to walk us through kind of some steps that we can take, you can take, we're going to pay attention to as the chamber to protect your computer system. So Mylan, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this morning, taking the time out to just take a look at things to help protect yourselves, help protect your business. As Mark had mentioned, one of many items in the news, the pipeline being hacked, shutting down the pumps that actually pump the fuel from Texas on up the East Coast, things of that nature. We all can see how hackers or bad actors can get in and shut things down. A little bit about myself. I started Datalink back in 1993. Prior to that, I was a subcontractor out at NSA for former network operations, security, monitoring and management, things of that nature. Started Datalink as an entity that can help the small and medium-sized businesses. Our coined phrase was Fortune 500 service, on a small business budget. I saw a need back in the early 1990s that small, medium-sized businesses needed a lot more handholding with the advent of using PCs, personal computers, things of that nature, and getting away from big computer systems. So with that said, let's jump right into what we wanted to talk about today. So, in today's environment, a lot of people probably don't realize this, but in 2020, there was roughly $4.2 billion lost, victim loss. It's broken down into different areas, corporate data breaches. And this is small business. This is not your huge big guys. Personal data breaches, credit card fraud for business credit cards, things of that nature. Presented by a government organization, IC3, which is kind of tasked to keep an eye on hacking, fraudulent claims, that kind of stuff. So you can see that 4.2 billion is quite a bit of money. for the bad guys to get. Like I said, the Internet Crime Complaint Center usually routinely monitors and analyzes the trends and scams. One of the biggest right now is business email. I'm probably sure that everybody has seen some form of what we call phishing, where people are sending you emails, either emails that look real, like banking emails, asking for your information, asking for credit card information, passwords, all of that kind of good stuff. One of the areas that a lot of people don't realize is on Facebook, Twitter, things of that nature. We've all probably, played along with a game, when did you get married, those kinds of things. And it'll spit back something about your personality or whatever. And it's kind of a cool thing to play around with. People don't realize it, when you're answering these questions, what you're really doing is giving bad guys data. And that means, they're sniffing around for your pet's name, for instance. A lot of people will use their pet name as a password. Dates, birth dates, anniversaries, things like that. People will use combinations of pet names and that data. So, we tell clients all the time, try not to, try to step back from those games and things like that are enticing, because really what you're doing is you're giving out personal information. Again, that leads into what I was just talking about. A lot of social media cybercrime. The IC3 was reporting that there's roughly about 3.25 billion per year in social media crime, where your Facebook account could get hacked. We've heard stories where an account's hacked, and the bad actor will send out requests for assistance. Hey, I'm in Virginia, my car broke down. Can you send me some money? As silly as it sounds, back in the day when a lot of these started coming out, people would fall for those kinds of schemes. So most of the areas that from the business standpoint that we're seeing that are getting attacked are financial institutions, healthcare, construction, legal, manufacturing. And the reason being is a lot of these areas, people don't realize, obviously finance, there's a lot of data there to be had to assume somebody's identity. There's a lot of social, bank account information, dates of birth, credit card information, driver's licenses, things of that nature. Obviously healthcare, there's a lot of personal information that's located in healthcare databases, both in hospitals, insurance companies, as well as small private practice doctors. They're all using electronic systems now and keeping a lot of what we call PII, personal identifiable information, in those systems. Construction. A lot of people don't realize, from a construction standpoint, housing market is really huge right now. So again, in that industry, there's a lot of your PII information that's taken on applications, mortgage information, and that kind of stuff. A lot of people don't realize that your PII information is stored in those kinds of systems. Obviously, legal systems. That's a no-brainer. But one of the most, I guess, unrelated or places that people don't really pay attention is going to be manufacturing. And manufacturing is going to consist of a whole bunch of things. It can even be considered Amazon, things of that nature. So purchasing from Amazon, eBay, a lot of online purchasing, which I'm sure we're all doing now, even grocery shopping, Giant, that kind of stuff. Their systems have a lot of your PI information. Again, they have your credit card information, your addresses, all of that kind of good stuff. So those are maybe the 5 big categories, but there's a lot more. What are the SMB challenges with cybersecurity? Obviously, there's a bunch of them, but we can start off with, the SMB owner or small business owner, they usually tend to say, I'm just a small guy. I'm a flower shop, for instance. I don't have any data that's of any importance. Well, if you take credit card information, you should be, adhering to what's called a PCI compliancy for protecting credit card information that you take for clients, for instance. Again, you have names, addresses, things of that nature that if somebody were to break into your system, could leverage at some point or start piecing a puzzle together of somebody's identity. They usually think from either their IT vendors or their internal IT staff or somebody that they've tasked with handling IT within the organization. Hey, I've got a backup system and I've got antivirus. That used to be true 8, 9, 10 years ago, but in today's environment, that's just a piece of the puzzle. Again, they don't believe that their data is important to the hackers. And they believe their team or their IT team has them covered. If you're a small business owner, you have an IT vendor or somebody who works as your IT person inside your organization, you're kind of doing a blind trust. Sometimes those people know everything they should know. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they'll tend to just kind of kick back and just ride along. So you need to have a trust but verify solution in place. So you teach yourself what is required for security, but also do a trust and verify of the people that are providing that for you. You want them to be very transparent, let you know what is covered, what's not covered, where your gaps are, and things of that nature. We keep a very close track on our industry. And right now in our industry, it's I'm sure everybody else is having the same issue, but finding qualified people for services. So, they did a survey. They're looking at about 3.5 million unfilled jobs for 2021 in the security industry, IT services industry. So even having a qualified IT service provider, that particular provider may be not fully staffed to provide quality service, things of that nature. Again, the point being, only the big guys are susceptible to any kind of cyber attack. Well, here's just a list of some local companies that we're all probably pretty familiar with that have been hacked to the extent where information has been compromised and potentially sold or used. One of the ones that I was very kind of unaware of was the public library. You think, why would somebody want to get into a public library? What data is there? Well, again, your name, your address, for starters, is information that, again, is just a piece of the puzzle. Somebody could get information from the library for your name and your address. Then, they might be able to go into the internal school system, gather some additional data there on family members, hop over to, MedStar, get, addresses. Get more information like insurance policies and, health, status of health and all that kind of good stuff. So again, as I'm going through this, presentation, we're building up to, pieces of the puzzle, and I'll get to where that can be used or where it is used. So a tale of two companies that kind of went through just a breach a couple years back. Marriott, the Marriott company, purchased a similar competitor, Starwood. And when they purchased that company, they didn't do enough due diligence to know the IT systems, to see if the IT systems had been compromised in any way, shape, or form. what systems were put in place to help protect, clients' data, again, like credit card information, names, addresses, even license plate numbers. So from that, what had happened was, there was up to 500 million guests that were compromised. So that was quite a big deal that, even though the news, brought it out and talked about it, it was kind of like a one-time, real quick, hey, this happened. But they didn't really go into the depth of the situation and how much data was compromised or how much of that data was used for anything. Again, Marriott, they're a Bethesda-based company, and they were looking at, losses of 13 billion, potential. I don't think they still know exactly how many people were compromised and what the value of the data was lost. Blue Cross Blue Shield, another firm on the medical side, 15,000 Medicare customers, their potential data was breached. And again, when we say potential data, it could be anything from name to family member to insurance policy or any of that kind of stuff. So the question is, why don't we hear more about the small business cyber attacks, which we've already seen. The IC3 organization tracks that there's a lot going on out there that we don't even really hear about. Biggest reason is it's not really noteworthy or newsworthy. It's extremely embarrassing to admit. If you can imagine, that small flower shop having to call their clients from a legal standpoint, letting them know that their data had been potentially compromised, credit card information, things like that. That wouldn't go over too well. Plus, as a business owner, it's going to be embarrassing. Obviously, it's going to be bad, PR. You don't want clients and referral of clients hearing that you had data that was supposed to be secure that got out. And then there's legal ramifications. You as a business owner could be susceptible to reimbursement or legal suits, things along those lines, should something like that or should some kind of compromise take place. A quick rundown of a law firm. This wasn't our client or anybody local in the Maryland area, but basically what had happened was there was a fairly good-sized law firm that got compromised. And they contracted a company called Crowdstrike, and we all might remember who Crowdstrike was. They were we'll call it the Internet Electronic Detectives that looked into Hillary Clinton's compromise of her emails to try to find out how they were compromised and all that kind of good stuff. So they contracted Crowdstrike to investigate their break-in. Upon looking into what was going on, they found 5 million encrypted files that had got encrypted by a ransomware. And what that basically means is, and hopefully nobody here has experienced that, but basically think of somebody taking your data and encrypting it so you cannot access that data. You go to click on a contract or something like that, and it will say encrypted, and it's going to ask for a password. And that's what happens with ransomware, and the bad guys will encrypt your data, hold it for ransom until you pay them, money to give you what the password is and decrypt the files. So they found 5 million files. They ended up paying $25,000 in ransom to get their data back. But that's, in the grand scheme of things, $25,000 is a lot of money. But for the importance of 5 million files to be encrypted, it's probably a cost of doing business. But here's the big thing: is their backups were corrupted. So whoever was doing their IT was not doing their due diligence and making sure that their backup systems were working. If they had, they could have restored a lot of that data without even having to pay a ransom or any of that kind of thing. But the biggest thing is they were down for 2 weeks. So, down for 2 weeks doesn't seem like a big deal. to a small business. But when you start adding up all the monetary side of payroll, taxes, the loss of revenue from clients, all of that kind of stuff, you all can do your own numbers on what your payroll and all that kind of stuff is. It becomes very expensive. It took roughly almost 40 hours to restore their operation. So again, for a solid 2 work weeks, they were not to do, they couldn't do any operations. The legal team couldn't do any contract work or work on any clients' information. It was pretty bad. So a lot of times, small businesses don't realize how much it can affect them, if they were to be infected with something or their data to be encrypted. When you talk about reputation, there's a Athens orthopedic small, 3 site, orthopedic firm. They had gotten hacked, and a lot of their medical records, they couldn't tell how many medical records were, attacked or compromised. But the biggest thing is, within 3 days, they had 9 public articles in their local area about their data breach. And, that alone could, potentially lose a lot of business for this particular organization or any small business, right? We're all marketing ourselves out there in LinkedIn, Facebook, other electronic media, plus print media, that kind of thing. So, if we were to get compromised, and the negative articles start to present themselves, we can all see how bad the reputation can be. Hancock Health, similar thing happened to those guys. They had to basically let their patients know, hey, we can't operate, we can't do anything. We're compromised, everything's electronic. So again, imagine going to your healthcare provider and seeing this note, on their door when you're supposed to be there for, say, a pre-op or just your general practitioner, and you can't get in to see them. And how these guys are doing it, how the bad guys are doing this, is they know just the right amount to charge and how much pain can be inflicted. They don't charge millions and millions of dollars to a small practice, but yet they're not going to charge $100, right? They're going to charge right in the thousands, 5, 10,000, 20,000, enough where it's going to make it worth the bad guy's time, and enough where it's just enough pain for the business owner to say, you know what, it's just worth it. Let me just pay the 25 and move on. The problem there is the bad guys will always keep going back to the well, right? Unless something changes or you've corrected the problem and how they got in before and that kind of stuff. So just because you pay the ransom doesn't always mean that you're in the clear. Again, hackers held, tons of patient information, $50,000. Again, 50,000 sounds like it's a lot, but if you're losing a couple 100,000, in a 2-week period in revenue and in paying out in payroll, that number really starts to look like it's a palatable number. I don't know if any healthcare providers are on, but one of the things also is from a HIPAA compliance or high-tech compliance standpoint, if you are compromised in any way, shape, or form, you are required legally to report that. So the Department of Health and Human Services tracks that. Basically, how many people were affected, this, that, all that kind of good stuff. And along with that, it's not just your data that you have to worry about. So in physicians briefing, there was a company called Wolverine Solutions Group that is a vendor. So it's an EHR vendor for private practice. They mishandled data that was compromised for several of their clients. And basically what they'll do is, they do billing and things of that nature. So they have access to those systems. Again, they have the PII information, the PHI information. So it's not just your systems that you have to worry about. You have to worry about your vendors and making sure that they're compliant and have a security protocol in place as well. So when we go through and explain the layout and the reasoning for cybersecurity and all of the pieces that go into the puzzle, we try to have a no geek speak methodology to it. And what I mean by that is, basically the couple things that you need to be aware of as an owner is the data owner, meaning whoever creates the data, wherever data is stored on systems. They're the ones that are liable for the loss of the data at the end of the day. It's not going to be your employees. It's not going to be your IT partners, things of that nature. It's actually going to be you as the business owner. So with that said, you need to make sure that your information technology processes and people that are supporting you, are trusted partners, and they've there's a trust but verify process with them. That they're have your best your best what's the word I'm looking for? I'm having a brain fart today, sorry. They're important. They want to make sure that you are as secure as possible. So they're considered what the custodians of the data. They're making sure that the data is going to be there and that kind of stuff. And hopefully they should be making sure that it's going to be secured for you as well. And then your information security team, which is what InfoSec stands for, they're going to be providing the risk insight. So think of it as a cybersecurity CTO, CIO. There's going to be a third party who's looking into that and making sure that your information is secure, identifying security gaps and things of that nature. So the team, the person who owns the data and has created the data, your information technology partner, along with an information security team, works closely together to make sure that you're as secure as possible. Now, with that said, without going into a lot of, like we say, geek speak and that kind of stuff, we like to use the example of a house and all the components that go into trying to keep your data and your business secure. So with that said, we have our house, and components of that house are obviously your doors, you have your locks, you have your alarm, you have, we'll say a dog or animals, you have the police, you have your neighborhood watch, you have insurance for protection of the house and items in the house. Maybe you have a doorbell camera, you have a baseball bat. And can anybody tell me what that might be used for? So basically, some kind of protection. You have yard signs warning people that, you have protection, motion sensors, a fence. Okay. So with that, they break out to some specific categories. One is, on the left-hand side, your doors, locks, fences, that's your protection. Okay. When you leave the house or go to sleep at night, you want to make sure your doors and windows are locked, those kinds of things. Your alarms, your motion sensors, doorbell cameras, that's detection. So you want to be able to detect if somebody bad is trying to get into your house. Okay. You want to have a response. So, you have your protection, you have your detection, which is going to let you know if somebody's trying to, circumvent your protection, your doors and locks. And then you're going to have a response. So how are you going to respond? Well, you might have a dog who is going to, bark and scare off the intruder. Insurance to obviously replace anything that may have gotten stolen. You're going to call the police or leverage some kind of protection, baseball bat, things of that nature. But prior to that, you want to make sure that you want to identify where your security holes are at. Okay. And by doing that, well, you want to identify, and then you want to have a reaction or recover solution. It's good to respond, but if something happens in these three categories, how are you going to recover and move on, right? So what this will represent is the National Institute of Standards and Technology they've developed a security framework, and it's 185 different things that best practices as a small business or any business should be implementing and doing. But to condense it, we've kind of just condensed it down a little bit so it's easy to digest. So one of the very first things that you want to do is obviously you want to walk around your house and inspect your security, right? Are my windows and doors locked? Do I have signs that warn people, that kind of stuff? And then from that, what you see that if there is a gap, you want to go through and you want to address under your protection scenario. Okay, so you might not have deadbolt locks, right? And one of the things is if you have deadbolt locks, it's going to make things a little bit more secure than just a regular key lock. So you want to go through and identify your gaps. And then on this side, you want to make sure that you have a plan to mitigate any damage. So, for example, in your business, you want to have a disaster recovery plan put together. So if something happens that you have to use a response, you want to make sure that you can recover relatively easy and quickly to get back up and running as much as possible. So example, if you have Microsoft Office and that gets compromised on OneDrive, for instance, you want to make sure that data is backed up and you have a secondary way of accessing that data quickly so you can continue to generate revenue, pay your employees, service your clients. So another way that you should look at this as a small business owner, and again with the help of professionals, but a lot of this you can do on your own, is there's a chart that we've developed that's here's the probability of risk and here's the consequence of risk, and it rates it from is it high or is it low. So to go through this exercise, it's pretty easy to do. Is and I'm just going to bring all these up here real quick. So if you went through your systems in your operation, for instance, obviously your finance systems for generating invoices, collecting money, things of that nature, obviously are for all small businesses going to be pretty critical, and payroll and things of that nature would be considered in finance. So if you go through and you look at your systems to say what systems are actually running, right? So you might have a server, which is a QuickBooks server and a file server. You might be using 365 that has, say, contracts and stuff like that that are very critical. If you went through that, your finance systems or your operational systems would be pretty critical. Again, the next thing down the line is your business system. So if you have a particular EMR or EHR, electronic health records system that you use, that's going to be obviously very critical as well. So you can kind of see how this goes down as far as what the business processes are and what the consequences are going to be. So, as a small business owner, it's good to take some time, just go through and say, how am I operating my business? What areas of my business, if it went down electronically, would hurt bad? What areas could I live through until I could get it back up and running? So a lot of this that we were talking about circles back around to what we call the dark web. So the dark web, and we all have probably heard about it, is an area that it's like a secret society, if you want to call it that. So if you do a representation of the internet in an iceberg, here's the surface web. Google, Office 365, all of that kind of mainstream stuff. But what we don't realize, below is, databases that are supposed to be secure, government databases, records, financial records, all that kind of stuff. This is what the bad guys are trying to get. Okay. Another area is, illegal activity, human trafficking, that kind of stuff. But why that matters is because here's a lot of areas. You got stolen credentials. And then in this area, again, stolen credentials for open door access. There was a study done that the Russians are able to turn data around in 19 minutes. And the average time that a system's been compromised is 197 days. So where does that affect a small business? Well, even if you have good backups, potentially your data has been compromised for 197 days with a payload that if they did something to gather your data, then what would happen is that you would not be able to get your data back up to 197 days. So you have to have a system in place that allows and protects for that. But again, that's, you can see where the time to circumvent a system and get your data out there it's crazy nowadays. This is what the underworld crime syndicate looks like. You can tell this is very organized. These guys are making billions of dollars doing what they do. So they're very sophisticated, and they come up with new ways of compromise on a daily, weekly, hourly basis. And just to give you a rough idea, the tools that these guys use, here's a cybercrime price list. So say I wanted to get a tool for remote accessing one of your computers, for instance. If I paid $200, it would be a tool that I could use to just go through and look at millions of computers to see what data I might be able to get to, password stealers, things of that nature. When you get down here, this is what the data is actually worth. Now, it doesn't seem like $3 for a social security number and date of birth is much, but these guys are dealing in hundreds of thousands and millions of data records. So if a syndicate wants to buy credit card information that they can use at one time, get in, buy something, and get out, they would buy 100,000 of those for $300,000. And if I was a guy that used these tools to get that data, I'd be getting paid $300,000 for, say, a $50 investment. Okay, so that's why you're seeing a lot of this. Dark web. Here's just some information. Roughly how they would get it. Email addresses. They would give a password hint. Basically this here is the full gamut. They've got the full email. They've got the full password. As I say, to a credit card account or a shopping account, something along those lines. And that's what you can buy for a couple bucks. Again, this is just some password hits from real data from that Sparrow group that we were talking about. But we've gotten rid of the password hints and stuff like that, and I'm sure all of that's been changed by now. So with all of that, what are our misconceptions, our small business conceptions, our misconceptions? One is, my data, it has no value. Okay. That's not true. Cybersecurity, it's a technology issue. Well, it's really more than a technology issue. It is a combination of physical security, vetting out your employees. As we all get more mature in our businesses, we're hiring younger, resources, and those resources are more electronically sophisticated. So, if you're not doing a trust but verify on your employees, there are potential issues for them to compromise your data, internal inside your four walls, credit card information, that kind of stuff. Cybersecurity requires a large financial investment. Cybersecurity does require an investment, but it doesn't really require a break the bank investment. There's a lot of things that small business owners can do that cost little to nothing. Like making sure that your passwords are changed on a regular basis, that kind of thing. So, and not use simple passwords, use an alphanumeric character, things of that nature, change them regularly. Outsourcing work to a vendor. So, if you are using a IT partner, it doesn't necessarily mean that by outsourcing that IT partner that everything is going to be golden and taken care of. Again, IT partners are only as good as that IT partner and their processes, right? So you have to do your due diligence and do a trust but verify there. Cyber breaches are covered by general liability insurance. That's not true. General liability insurance will not cover any kind of electronic cyber breach, things along those lines. You need specific insurance for that. Let's see here.
And that's going to be our next part. We're going to talk about that soon.
Yep, exactly. We'll lead into that. Cyber attacks always come from external actors. Again, we talked about that. A lot of data that's breached, people don't realize, are from internal of the organization itself. Just having blind trust with your employees. Young people are better at cybersecurity than others. Again, that's another farce. I just mentioned that even though the younger generation is much more inept to using technology, it doesn't necessarily mean that they understand how to protect that data and or make sure that it's not going to be infiltrated and things along those lines. Compliance with industry standards is enough for security. So even though you are, say, healthcare and you're following HIPAA compliance, or you take credit cards and you're following PCI compliance, doesn't necessarily mean just because you're following that compliance means that you're completely protected. Each organization that recommends or demands compliance, FINRA, they all follow the NIST protocol, and then they add their own twist to it. So the best practice is typically follow the NIST protocol and then add on whatever compliance organization that you need to comply with it within your business. Digital and physical security are separate. Again, best practices, your computer room doors, make sure they're locked, which is that's non-electronic. Making sure that your systems are set to log off so people can't just walk up to a system that's turned on and left on. Nowadays, even having physical security to your building, making sure that your doors are locked, that kind of thing. That's part of security as well. A lot of people forget about that piece. They think it's just computers and internet and that kind of stuff. Again, last but not least, a lot of people think, hey, I'm buying a brand new computer or a brand new software, or I'm buying, the latest version of QuickBooks or whatever. You automatically assume that it's patched, it's updated, it's protected. It's not. Every piece of equipment that you purchase typically has to be patched and updated from a security standpoint. That kind of good stuff. So basically, in a nutshell, there's 15 ways that we recommend that businesses should be protecting themselves. One is you want to do a security assessment, which is what we had talked about, walking around your house, seeing what gaps you have from a security standpoint. You can't really protect what you don't know that you don't know. A big one is spam. So in combination of training your employees, have good tools that filter out bad guys sending bogus email that look like it's from Bank of America, things of that nature. We talked about passwords, making sure that your passwords are changed on a regular basis. We recommend 30 days and no less than an 8 or 10 character alphanumeric password. Now, I know everybody's going to say it's hard to do, right? To remember my password, all that kind of good stuff. There's tools that are in place nowadays, so you can do a self-serve password reset if you forget. So you should be taking advantage of those. Security awareness. This is something that's very simple that you can do. It's no cost within your organization. Send out an email or a reminder to your employees and resources. Hey, pay attention to emails that you're opening up that may look like from our organization or whatever. We had a particular client in the mortgage banking arena. Well, not our client. They became our client after this happened to them. They got spoofed with an email from a bad guy, and it looked like it came from the president of the company authorizing transfer of funds for a closing. And the young lady who was doing the work even called the president to make sure. He was driving, distracted, said, yes, go ahead and do it. Come to find out, they transferred $325,000 to some place over in Nigeria. Now they were able to get everything back but $90,000, but that was just, something simple as just calling somebody and checking and paying attention to something that just doesn't seem like it's correct. Protecting your computers. So one of the things that's happening nowadays is bad guys are circumventing antivirus and that kind of stuff, and actually submitting payloads directly to your operating system. So without knowing that, they have a backdoor into your operating system to have carte blanche of what's going on the system. So you need to look at tools that detect that as soon as possible and then block that from happening. Disconnect your machine from the internet automatically. That these tools will do that. Multi-factor authentication, we're all familiar with that, where if we're logging into our credit cards, we have a password, and then we get a code that we have to put in. You should be using multi-factor for all of your Office 365 or any line of business applications, things of that nature. We talked about computer updates. When you buy a new computer, you think it's already updated. It's really not. You need to run the updates on a regular basis and confirm that those updates are running like they're supposed to. We talked about the dark web research. It's good to look at the dark web information. There's tools out there that allow you to do that, to see if your email is out there for whatever reason. You might be surprised that M. Staten at Datalink Tech is out there because I'm logging into eBay or whatever it is. They may not have all of the information, but they have my email, and they might have a password that was a good password 40 days ago, but I've changed it since then. So, again, combination of seeing if your information is out there, but also changing passwords on a regular basis. I won't go into a lot of these other things. They're kind of more technical, but the SOC SIM, looking real time what's happening on your network. If bad guys get on your network, they'll do quirky things that aren't normal for a network. So tools like this will you bring those to somebody's attention so they can look at it. Use your IT partner, your IT provider. Mobile security, web gateway, obviously, firewall. Data that you send or receive. So if you're in a legal profession or even in a profession that might have compromising information in the document, you want to make sure that those emails are sent and received encrypted, okay? Because they have what's called a man in the middle for Office 365, where somebody can be, so you're sending the email to me, somebody in the middle could be filtering and looking at that data if it's not encrypted. So if there's social credit card information, bank information in that document for whatever reason, they could potentially compromise that. Obviously, backup, having a known good backup. So those are the 15 critical. There's a 16th. We suggest that you, and we're going to lead into that, cybersecurity insurance, is a 16th component on there. We just didn't put that on. So with that said, I want to, that's pretty much the end of the presentation. If anybody has any questions or anything like that about today's presentation from us, you can reach out to us, info@datalinktech.com. And we'll send over with that said, we'll send over a free NIST cybersecurity workbook for you guys to take a look at and just kind of get a better understanding of things that you should be doing, best practices for cybersecurity.
I have a question. I don't know if you have a minute for my question. But the question I have, I just wondering, what about the cloud? You always hear about the cloud. Would you be able to store data on a big cloud so that it would be protected there and you wouldn't have to worry about it on your own computer?
Well, that's kind of a farce. Yes, you can. But the same best practices that we talk about for local systems and file servers within your four walls, that really mimics exactly that same thing. So cloud servers, Office 365, your software as a service, products that you have that you use for line of business applications. Like, so if you're a if you're a banking system, some of that, well, not so much banking because a lot of that's in-house, but EMR packages for healthcare. A lot of legal teams use what's called software as a service. Some people use QuickBooks cloud services. All of those things should still follow some of the best practices of multi-factor authentication, encryption, all of that kind of stuff. So the answer to your question, Mark, you still need to have those kinds of services in place.
All right, Mylan, thank you. You covered a lot of ground, and if we can make that the presentation and that booklet you talked available to us, to the chamber, we'll get it out to everybody that was
Okay,
online
sounds
today.
good. Absolutely.
That would be great. Well, in the event it were to happen that you were hacked and had an issue, there is insurance available to help you through this. And so for us to understand that a little bit, let me turn it over to Rob to kind of tee us up for the next part of the presentation about cyber insurance.
Rob? He's on mute. He's muted.
So yeah, I don't know if you can. Well, why don't we we'll jump over to Kristen. Kristen is going to be our presenter. She has.
Sorry about that. I didn't realize
Rob.
I was muted. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thanks for joining the meeting, and I guess it's my understanding that this will be emailed out to the group too, so that'll be informative. And my name's Rob with Baltimore Insurance Network, and we're a local insurance broker that specializes in commercial insurance. And today we're excited to have Christine Walker with us. She's a manager at Chubb Insurance, and she'll be giving an overview on the offerings that they have available for cyber insurance coverage. And through the presentation, you can see how we'd be able to tailor a cyber insurance plan for your business and just the overall importance of the coverage. And if anyone is interested in reviewing their current insurance or might not have cyber insurance coverage associated with their plan, they'd probably be surprised on the cost of it. And there's a good chance we could add it and while reviewing your coverage and include that with your current coverage for the same price. And you can find our contact information at just baltimoreinsurancennetwork.com. And I'll let Christine take it from here just to give an overview of the products from Chubb and what they have to offer.
Thank you so much, Rob. Hey, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here. Just let me know if you're able to see it.
It's starting to come up. There it is. We see it.
We see
Okay,
it.
perfect. Perfect. Well, thanks so much, everyone. I'm Christine Walker with Chubb Insurance Company, like Rob said. I'll be discussing our cyber ERM products, and ERM stands for Enterprise Risk Management.
We don't see your face if you want us to see your face.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure how that's not working. Okay. So just a quick disclaimer, the material that's presented here is not intended to provide any legal advice. So any of the subjects mentioned is just for presentation and general information only. If you do have questions for legal advice, please contact your legal experts. All right. Are you able to see that? Something's happening with the transitions here.
Yes, we
It's
see it.
cyber.
Slide.
Chubb Cyber is the
Okay.
screen I'm seeing.
Okay, perfect. So here we have our Cyber ERM and Digitech ERM in our marketplace, which is our quoting platform that we use. We like to think that we stand out with coverage, service, pricing, and our platform. With our industry-leading value proposition, we offer loss mitigation services. We have a cyber response team and risk transfer solutions. We do pride ourselves on fast track online quoting. So if you are interested in a quote, you would just reach out to your agency like Rob, and he would be able to go onto our rating platform and provide a quote for you, usually same day, unless it's a very high risk type of account. And then experience, we are one of the top 3 cyber markets in the last 10 years. So that gives us a little bit more leeway and things, as far as working in the industry, having experience. We have over 20 years of cyber underwriting experience and 30 years of technology underwriting experience. We've practiced claims staffing that has handled over 800 million in cyber payments claims. And our appetite is the same product across all accounts for small, medium, and major accounts. We don't have any minimum premiums, and our small commercial customers get the same product as large Fortune 100 companies. And just as a side note, the Digitech is for our technology-based businesses, like I mentioned, and the cyber ERM is for anything that is not technology-based. So small companies should buy cyber. They should. Small businesses have gone from 18% to 61% of phishing targets from 2016 until now. As you can see here, we have risks and solutions. And a lot of these solutions are Chubb-based. So in addition to both the United States Nations Office and Drugs and Crimes Unit, we have surveys that show about 67% of small businesses have no data security policies at all. And 1/3 of them that do have security policies, about 87% of them do not even know the policy language or if it was formally written. So not to scare anybody into a policy, but just make sure that if you do have something, you're reading it and understanding it and digesting it so that you're covered for everything you think you're covered for. So we've just discussed some reasons why small businesses should have cyber, but they don't. Today, a small fraction of companies actually buy cyber insurance. Well under 10% of small and mid-sized businesses buy cyber insurance. And even among risks with over 5 million in revenue, only 35% purchase cyber insurance. And this is a very small percentage of companies that are buying cyber insurance today. It's not a giant leap to predict that the ones that are buying it would likely tend to be of the higher risk variety, meaning, you do have those payment card industry standards that you follow. But as we all know, the larger the tree, the harder it falls, right? So a lot of times, if you are open to those risks, you'll have folks that are going to take advantage of those opportunities. Perhaps our industry needs to do a better job of making cyber solutions more accessible to the smaller and lower hazard companies. So that sort of begs the question, how do we do that, right? So here's a quick little snapshot of the types of insurance, industries that purchase cyber insurance. So as you can see here, it's not a lot. You would think that these percentages would be higher, technology especially. And I think that goes into play where we've got it under control. Folks think that they have it handled when perhaps they don't, or they're just uneducated in a way that they again think that they are provided that coverage but don't have it. So what is the market telling us? What are the biggest obstacles of selling or purchasing this coverage? According to agents, the biggest hurdles can be bunched into 4 categories. One is not understanding the coverage. Even experts can struggle with understanding the differences between forms, especially between multiple carriers. That's not uncommon to have different policy language from one carrier to another. Another would be not understanding the exposures. So I read this as, we know there are exposures, we just don't understand them well enough to address them. So it's kind of one of those, if we bury our heads in the sand long enough, it might not affect us. The next one being cost. Beyond just the deal by deal pricing consideration, I think it's fair to say that the market is fairly pricing this for lower hazard accounts. Based on the previous slide that we saw, they're just not purchasing the insurance. And then finally, process. So I think it's a misconception that folks think that it's going to be a long and cumbersome process or application to get a policy. And again, with, as we mentioned before, during Mylan's presentation, he was saying, a flower shop might not think that they need the coverage. So when you have those smaller risks that maybe they're only taking some credit card information or things like that, yes, they are open to exposure, but that's, again, on the smaller scale of things. They're not, a worldwide operation. They might just be a local small flower shop. So that wouldn't take them very long at all. The last item on this list was surprising to me. We know that most clients aren't getting robust services along with their cyber policies. We feel that the importance of risk mitigation and response service separates us from the other cyber insurers out there. And it is a top priority of mine to ensure I deliver the message that everyone should have cyber coverage in today's current climate. So how do we address these pain points to our consumers? I think the biggest one, and Mylan hit on this one too, is education. Whether you're the agent or the consumer, education on cyber risk management is key. At Chubb, we provide resources to our policyholders to give the opportunity to protect themselves and their businesses. Password encryption, risk management courses online, and claim scenarios that are always coming out, just to name a few. And these are to provide a little bit more peace of mind on top of the policy to help mitigate risk before any claim takes place. Second being our product. We offer the same products to Main Street as we do to multinational risks, with pricing tailored to the risk, including, again, no minimum premiums for the smaller accounts. Third, our service. Even the smallest accounts get access to the best-in-class pre- and post-event services. Again, we do offer classes and risk mitigation upfront, and then again, post-event services to help, with anything that should happen after a claim does occur. And fourth, ease of access. Your agent can get a quote, bind, and issue in about 5 minutes, meaning they give you you give your agent the information, they go online to our quoting portal, provided it's not something that has a whole lot of losses or anything already, you're able to get that straight through processing with your agent, and that policy will be in your hands in about 5 minutes. Now we'll talk a little bit about cyber intelligence. And Michael Tannenbaum is the Chubb's Financial Lines director, and he actually talked to the Wall Street Journal and said that he's noticed patterns of claims trends that would better suit our clients if we were transparent. So we definitely share all of our claims trends and scenarios with our agents and our insureds, just so that they know that these incidents are happening and they can happen to you as well. So here's the exposure by environment. Cyber risks are numerous, complex, and ever-changing. This is Chubb data. So what this tells us about the exposure in our environment is that cyber incidents occur in many ways, as do losses. Data breach, liability, loss of income, restoration, lots of different flavors of both cause and consequence. And even the best protections can't prevent all losses. Rogue employees, human error, paper-related privacy events and simple failures of software account for nearly half of losses. And those really can't be, completely prevented. I mean, human error is always going to be there. As we try to transition from paper to, digital and cloud-based solutions, we'll still always have a little bit of paper-related privacy events. But just like Margaret had mentioned before, storing things on the cloud, it's basically paper, it's just digital paper. So if someone's going to hack it, or if those pieces of information can get lost, it's sort of like where there's a will, there's a way. So these losses can't be prevented at all costs. But the good news is that even the simplest of protections can mitigate any or all of these areas. For example, human error, they could take a cyber awareness training, which we do provide. Lost stolen devices, you could have endpoint protection or encryption. So that's, again, with our password help. We have password creators. We have help to do different encryptions on passwords, and even how to encrypt data that you would put on your cloud. Paper records, we recommend document retention and destruction when you can, of either burning or shredding the information prior to throwing it away. Software, how about vulnerability scanning? So there's a lot of different software out there that you can put on your computer, and it will tell you where you're vulnerable, where things might be able to leak through, or people might be able to get in with different hacking software. And then as far as the rogue employee goes, screening and access protocols for those types of onboarding scenarios. And we do provide a lot of those with the Chubb policy as well. But the single best overall control is to hire a qualified person to be in charge of information security for the company, and give that person the authority and autonomy they need to be effective based on the unique risks and the scale of those risks at the company. So for large corporations, for example, that probably means designating like a chief information security officer and having them report directly to the board. Or for a small company, it likely means something different. It doesn't have to mean overspending. It just means common sense, like home security. Not everyone needs it. The more expensive and elaborate security systems you have depends on things, whether you have kids to protect, or what kind of neighborhood you live in, and maybe how good at Brazilian jiu-jitsu you are, or how well you wield that bat. So a common saying in the cyber world is, when it comes to cyber risk, we all live in a bad neighborhood. And I'll just close it out with one more comment about trends. What we're seeing more and more of, and what the customers are asking about, is ransomware and cyber extortion. This may impact you personally, so think about what's important to you and what's protected. I save disk backups of family photos and videos. Spear phishing and vishing, those are a lot of things that come into play. For larger, things like W-2 fraud, it's tax season. A lot of that stuff still in play. So you want to make sure that you're backing those things up, and that you are running your software that you have to mitigate those risks for any kind of ransomware or cyber extortion that may come through. Here you can see the exposure environment, and Chubb reported out on this. Over the last decade, healthcare has been 38% of what's the largest exposure for cyber breach risk. So these cyber incidents are coming through as hacking, and I can show you on the next slide. It will go into how this works. So are they internal, external, or is it a partner of maybe that you partner with, that like a supplier or a vendor? So what you can see here is internal employees, independent contractors, and interns. Those are the folks who might be checking their personal email or surfing a website that might give access to somebody trying to hack in. External, again, criminal groups, hackers, former employees, and government entities. Those are where your phishing scams come in, where they send something to an email and someone opens it unknowingly, and now you're at risk. And then the partners, that's at 6%. So a lot of times you're not seeing those folks coming in and having that, and mainly because suppliers, vendors, outsource IT, and hosting providers generally are the folks that do carry cyber insurance. Here are some triggers by industry over the last decade. So you can see the retail and the financial, and I'm sorry, the retail and the travel and hospitality are the biggest as far as hacks here. Financial institutions coming up at 34% behind them. But in the healthcare industry, you can see it's human error. That's a big deal. That could be anything, any one of these things. We hear a lot of times, sometimes risks can happen just, where an employee just didn't know what to do, or, they lost that piece of paper, or they opened that email. So a lot of times you'll see in the healthcare industry, those phishing scams.
Kristen, I have a question. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm, as an employee, like when you talk about the employees, most people are like I am. They're really just not that savvy with the computer. I mean, I know a lot of things. I can, run the computer pretty well, but I'm really interested in the education you would provide for the employees, because you said you have some mitigating tools, that you can provide for us, where we could go and get some education, maybe, or some webinars or something from Chubb.
Yes, absolutely. So we do have webinars that you can take, and some of them do have a testing component at the end, just to kind of test your knowledge afterwards. It's obviously not anything that you have to pay for extra, or anything that means anything more than just your own personal educational piece. But those can be found on our website. And you can also take a lot of those courses without having a policy, just for general information.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay.
You can find that on chubb.com/cybersecurity.
Thank you.
And here's another one. I just wanted to add in the technology, education, professional service, and public entity, just so you could see, across all boards, professional services and technology. I think they're pretty even all the way across the board as far as where their exposures lie. So if you do have a business like that, or you have clients that have business like that, you definitely want to reach out to them and make sure that they are covered properly. It's not just hacking scenarios. Across the board, it's pretty even as far as what could potentially go wrong for them. And incident response costs over the last 3 years, as you can see, forensics is the big kicker here. That's how we dive in and find out what actually occurred. 61% of Chubb's reported incidents are less than 100 compromised records. So that's a big deal. Legal costs and PR crisis management costs are trending down a little these days, but forensics, notification, and credit monitoring are trending up. So I have a couple of frequently asked questions that I will discuss, just so that you can see what we hear a lot, and maybe answer some questions that you might be thinking about. So again, like I said, we don't have any minimum premiums. The minimum exposure base is 250,000. So just so you know, we can go up to a pretty large policy as far as coverage. What are the maximum limits available? Other than cyber crime, we always have the sublimits. We provide up to 2 million limits for eligible classes for the online quoting. And if it's anything larger than that, we can obviously get an underwriter involved, and and discuss any large accounts that you may have. And then here the difference between cyber and the digitech, like I mentioned, the digitech is for the technology. It can provide some errors and omissions coverage to the technology companies, but the cyber coverage remains the same. It's just an additional piece of coverage. And the difference between the cyber and the BOP endorsement is that it's significantly less coverage on the BOP. It might suffice for those folks that have, a smaller mom and pop retail shop. But really that would be something that they would want to discuss with their legal experts and things to discuss how much they really have to lose. So just as far as that goes, the cyber endorsement is much less coverage, about $10,000 in the data breach fund, where you can go up to millions in the data breach fund on the cyber policy itself. I know I burned through all of that pretty quickly. Does anybody have any questions?
That was super informative. Thanks, Christine.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank
And
you. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rob.
oh, I was just gonna say thanks for everyone for coming. And and with Amy, I didn't know if she was gonna jump back on, but that pretty much wraps up, our end of it.
No, great. Thank you both to Mylan and for Kristen for that presentation and information about what to do to prevent and what happens on the other end in the event you have been hacked and have the insurance, and the insurance is something to look into. So I think you have the contact information about that. So we recorded the session, so we'll get that squared away, and the link will be provided to you all. And then we'll get some information, or the information that was shared today,